There's something no one told you about the day someone finally truly saw you. You always imagined it would be good, that it would be a relief, a lightness, that breath of fresh air of not having to pretend anymore. But no one warned you that the first reaction of someone who looks deep inside a Scorpio isn't enchantment, it's fear. It happened to someone you know. Maybe it happened to you. The person got close, stayed close enough, long enough, and one day stopped seeing just the surface, stopped seeing the calculated silence, the polite smile, the short and gentle answer you used to avoid opening the door too wide. And what they found on the other side left them paralyzed. Not because you're dangerous, not because there's anything wrong, but because what lives inside a Scorpio is too big to fit into elevator conversations, into the smiles that most people exchange every day without a second thought. And when someone finally sees that size, something inside them cracks. You've felt this before, even without knowing how to name it. That moment when you realize the other person has taken a step back after getting too close. Nobody talks about it openly, but every Scorpio recognizes this silence that comes right after being seen, a silence different from the silence of rejection, more like the silence of someone who has seen fire up close and doesn't know whether to move away or get even closer. There's a question that gets stuck in the throat of anyone who lives with a Scorpio. What exactly is this person hiding? And there's another, more unsettling question stuck in the Scorpio's own throat. Why, every time someone gets too close to the truth, does this urge to shut everything down again arise? Because it's not about hiding a secret. It's about an entire mechanism, trained over years, that constantly decides how much of you can be shown without becoming a weapon in someone's hands. This mechanism works silently, beneath every choice of whether to open up or not, to tell or not to tell, to trust or to test a little more before trusting. And it is precisely this silent mechanism that frightened the person who finally saw you, because they expected to find a small mystery, an old pain, a simple explanation. Instead, they found an entire structure, functioning for years, designed to survive any kind of betrayal. And when someone sees a structure like that, they don't just see you, they see the price you paid to build it. There's a moment in the midst of this discovery when the person on the outside realizes they're not dealing with any fragile defense. They're dealing with power, a power that has never been used to hurt anyone, but that exists, pulsating, waiting. And that's when their fear stops being about you and starts being about themselves. Because they also have a mechanism like that. Only theirs has never been tested. Notice something. No one is afraid of what is weak. Fear only appears when someone realizes they are facing something bigger than they can measure. And that's what happened when that person got too close to you. They misjudged it. They thought they would find a small, locked room. They found an entire ocean, with its own currents, with a bottom that even you haven't fully explored. There's a scene that repeats itself in almost every Scorpio's story. The exact moment when someone stops talking, lowers their gaze, changes the subject without realizing it. It's the body reacting before the mind fully understands what happened. And you know when someone has just seen too much, so that question remains unanswered. Why do we train our whole lives to hide precisely that which, if shown carefully, could be the most powerful thing anyone has ever seen in us? It was in this tireless search for answers that I found this digital book, The Divine Path That Guides Your Zodiac Sign to a Life of Purpose. Doesn't see Scorpio as a problem to be tamed or a mystery to be smoothed over to please others. It celebrates this depth for what it has always been, a rare gift of seeing beyond the surface, of rejecting shallow versions of people and of existence itself. It is this powerful instinct to go deep that the book helps to channel, without extinguishing its intensity, without transforming you into someone easier to understand at the cost of giving up who you really are. You are feeling it now, at this very moment. Your heart is still processing each word, recognizing in you this mechanism I just described, perhaps reviving the memory of a face that once recoiled from your truth. This discomfort throbbing within you is not weakness. It is your soul screaming that the time has come to stop postponing, to finally allow yourself to be understood, starting with yourself. Don't let this truth go back into the old drawer. The link is pinned in the first comment, but be aware, this content may be taken down at any time. Click now, download your copy, and start rediscovering yourself today. Tell me in the comments below, when was the last time someone backed away after truly seeing you, and how did you feel when that happened? The person who saw you that day didn't leave immediately. That's what nobody tells you. They stayed there for one more second, trying to decide whether to retreat completely or take another step towards what they had just found. That second, that exact moment of hesitation, is where almost everything Scorpio needs to understand about themselves resides. Because there's an old, almost folkloric belief that Scorpio scares people because it's too intense, too dark, too difficult to decipher. But the truth is more uncomfortable than that. Scorpio doesn't scare people because it's complicated. It scares them because it's simple in a way that most people have never dared to be. Direct when others beat around the bush, silent when others feign enthusiasm, faithful to a feeling even when that feeling hurts. There's no calculation there. There's a naked truth. And naked truth is the rarest thing someone can find in a lifetime, surrounded by edited versions of everything. What the person actually saw was a mirror. And that's why they recoiled. Not because you're scary, but because upon seeing the real you, they were forced to realize how much they themselves live edited, controlled, divided into small versions of themselves to fit anywhere. Faced with someone who doesn't do that, who doesn't know how to do that, the difference becomes unbearable to confront. There's a pattern that repeats itself in virtually every relationship a Scorpio builds. In the beginning, fascination. People are drawn to that depth, to that feeling that something rare exists there, something worth discovering. But as the discovery progresses, the fascination begins to share space with growing discomfort. Because discovering a true Scorpio requires letting go of one's own masks as well, and few people are prepared for that price. There's a second layer to this mechanism, even more hidden. Scorpio doesn't just keep its own secrets. Without realizing it, it keeps the secrets that others never dared to face. Each person who got close enough unknowingly left behind an uncomfortable piece of truth, something they preferred not to confront. And Scorpio, with this almost involuntary ability to see deep, carries these pieces even without being asked. That's why living closely with a Scorpio can sometimes feel like standing before a mirror that reflects back more than you wanted to see. No one taught you to do this on purpose. You simply see it, and what you see is unsettling because most people spend their entire lives avoiding precisely this type of mirror. There's a whole chapter to this story that almost no one tells, what happens to Scorpio themselves after someone backs down. The pain isn't just from being misunderstood. It's the specific pain of showing the truest part of yourself and seeing that truth treated as a threat. After experiencing this a few times, a pattern silently sets in. Why show it again, if showing it hurts as much as hiding it? And therein lies a subtle trap, because the Scorpio who learns never to show their true colors again doesn't become protected, they become alone. The protection that should only last as long as necessary for healing becomes a permanent residence. Years pass. Relationships come and go on the surface, and no one else gets close enough to test that mechanism again. Not because the right people don't exist, but because the door has been locked for too long for any of them to find the lock. There's something curious about this pattern. The more a Scorpio is hurt by showing too much, the more they learn to control exactly how much they will show next time. It's not a conscious decision made on any given morning. It's a fine-tuning, almost automatic, that happens after each poorly received exposure experience. Imagine a thermostat regulating the temperature of a room. No one needs to press the button every time. The system learns on its own what the safe point is. But there's a problem with this emotional thermostat. It doesn't perfectly distinguish between who will run away and who will stay. It generalizes. And after a few burns, it starts closing the door, even to those who would never give a reason to. That's how a Scorpio, without realizing it, pushes away exactly the type of person they most needed to let in. Why does this happen? Because the body remembers pain more strongly than the mind remembers the context. And the protective mechanism, trained to avoid suffering, prefers to err on the side of caution. It prefers to lose a good connection rather than risk another disappointment. It's a logic that makes sense on the surface, but when examined closely, proves too costly. That question keeps echoing, doesn't it? Why show it again if showing it hurts as much as hiding it? But notice, hiding also has a price, only that price is paid slowly, silently over the years. It was precisely this cycle that led me to seek out the divine path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose. The book addresses this specific wound. It shows how to transform Scorpio's depth into real connection, not repeated isolation. To stop choosing between hiding and suffering, and to learn a third way of existing. This content may disappear at any time. The link is in the first pinned comment. But there's a twist in this story that changes everything. Because at some point, some Scorpio, tired of repeating this cycle of showing and retreating, decides to do something different. They decide to stop showing everything at once, as if it were a test, and start showing little by little slowly, choosing who deserves each layer. This is not weakness. It's the mature version of the same power. And this is where astrology meets something that psychology has confirmed for decades. Excessive emotional protection stems from real experiences, not exaggeration. Every defense mechanism existed for a reason. The issue was never about dismantling this mechanism completely, but rather learning to operate it more precisely, knowing when it truly protects and when it merely isolates unnecessarily. There's a moment, almost always late at night, when a Scorpio wonders if they'll ever find someone capable of staying after seeing everything. This question seems lonely, but it's actually universal. Every human being asks themselves this, but Scorpios ask with more honesty because they already know the true magnitude of what they're asking someone to accept. The answer no one has given you yet is this. There are people capable of this, few, but they exist, and they don't back down because they have no fear of depth. They back down from superficiality, from empty talk, from people who have never shown anything real. In the presence of someone genuine, they stay. The problem was never that you were too intense. It was that you haven't yet found someone who knows how to recognize the value of that. And there's a way to recognize these people even before you fully expose yourself to them. Pay attention to how someone reacts to your pauses, not just your words. Those who are in a hurry to fill your silence with an anxious question or a nervous joke usually don't know how to deal with any depth. On the other hand, those who can remain within your silence without despairing, without demanding an immediate explanation, are generally the ones who also carry layers of their own, even if they haven't yet shown them. This recognition that there are people capable of staying changes the whole game. But recognizing this in theory and living it in practice are different things, and the distance between the two is usually resolved with direction, not just with hope. It was with this in mind that I returned to the divine path that guides your zodiac sign towards a life of purpose. It doesn't promise to make acceptance easier. It promises something more honest, to help you recognize within your own intensity, who deserves to see deeper and who is just passing through. This isn't about waiting for the perfect moment. It's about stopping postponing what can truly change this pattern. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey toward the clarity and genius you deserve. There is one last layer to this story, perhaps the most uncomfortable of all. Because up to this point, everything seems to point outward. The other who retreated, the other who lacked courage, the other who misjudged the depth they encountered. But there is a mirror within the mirror itself, and it points inward. How many times have you, Scorpio, recoiled from someone who came too close to your own truth? How many times was the fear you attribute to others actually your own fear, projected outward because it was easier to bear that way? This is the paradox that astrology raises and that psychology confirms without mincing words. Those who fear being seen the most are usually, at the same time, those who most rigorously watch others for sincerity. Perhaps the person who scared you that day wasn't just the one who recoiled from you. Perhaps it was also a moment when you, looking at their reaction, saw reflected your own fear of being too much, of feeling too much, of meaning too much to someone who perhaps didn't know how to handle it. And this recognition, however difficult it may be, is the first real step towards stopping the pattern. Because there is a huge difference between protecting what is sacred and burying what is sacred until it stops hurting. The first attitude preserves, the second suffocates. And most Scorpios, at some point in their lives, confuse the two without realizing it, thinking they are taking care of themselves when in reality they are isolating themselves. The new perspective that remains, after all this descent, is not one of hiding less out of obligation, nor of showing everything at once out of impulse. It is one of recognizing with clarity when silence protects and when silence merely prolongs a solitude that has already lasted too long. This distinction changes everything. It transforms intensity into direction and depth into a bridge instead of a wall. Imagine a key that only works when used in the right lock. Kept in your pocket all day, it protects nothing, it just weighs you down. Used indiscriminately on any door, it loses all its unique value. The power of a key lies precisely in knowing which door it opens and in having the patience to wait until you find that right door. Its depth works the same way. It's not meant to be hidden forever, nor given to just anyone. It's meant to be recognized, carefully kept, and used exactly where it belongs. This distinction between protecting and stifling is exactly the kind of clarity that doesn't build itself overnight. It requires tools, and this is where I mention the divine path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose again, because it was designed precisely for this moment in history. The instant when you stop looking only outward and start looking inward at your own pattern. The material helps to calmly map where genuine care for what is sacred within you ends, and where isolation disguised as protection begins. It's an internal process, but one that needs guidance, not left to its own devices. You already possess the genius, you just need to unlock it. Access is in the first comment, but the last few units are disappearing. Click now and start this transformation. There's an old image that astrologers use to talk about Scorpio, that of a volcano that spends its entire life quiet, covered in vegetation, looking like an ordinary mountain among many others. No one suspects what lies inside until the day it decides to show itself. And even then, even after showing itself, the mountain remains there, firm, the same, only now seen in its entirety. Perhaps the person who was frightened that day will never return. It happens, and it hurts, and it's real. But that same depth that frightened someone unprepared is exactly what, one day, will leave the right person paralyzed in a completely different way. Not with fear, with reverence. You weren't born to be small enough to fit into just any relationship. You were born to be recognized by those who have the courage to look deep and not look away. And that, in the end, isn't a Scorpio curse. It's the rare kind of strength the world has always needed, even without knowing how to name it. There's something profoundly human about carrying an entire ocean inside and still walking among people who only know shallow puddles. It's not easy, and perhaps it will never be completely easy. But there's a silent dignity in keeping that depth alive, in not letting the fear of others determine the size of who you are. The tides continue to exist even when no one is looking at the sea, and that's exactly how your truth remains real, even on the days when it seems like no one has dared to dive in.